Freedom is what you do with what has been made of you. Jean-Paul Sartre. What does this phrase really mean? It sounds liberating, but it can also be terrifying. If you're honest with yourself, you'll realize that most of your choices aren't really yours. They are the result of other people's expectations, of the circumstances that have shaped your life, of the paths that seemed easiest or safest. But Sartre tells us something uncomfortable. In the end, it doesn't matter what they've done to you. What matters is what you do with it. What would you do if you realized that you had been hiding from your own freedom all your life? If the anxiety you feel wasn't a problem, but a symptom? A sign that you are free, but don't know what to do with that freedom? Sartre believed that this anguish is inevitable. And if that's true, then why do some people feel this existential vacuum so strongly, while others seem to ignore it? And that's exactly where the anguish begins. We want to believe that we have a right path to follow. But what if this is an illusion? What if the truth is that nobody knows where to go, because there is no predefined destination? Imagine you're thrown into the middle of the ocean, with no map, no land in sight. There is no correct route, just a sea of possibilities. Most people, faced with this, would despair. But what about you? What will your response be to the emptiness? Jean-Paul Sartre was one of the thinkers who delved most deeply into this issue. For him, freedom is a burden because it forces us to be entirely responsible for what we become. And this responsibility is frightening, because we can no longer blame fate, society, God, or any other external force. In the end, we are the ones who choose. Even when we decide not to choose, that too is a choice. Perhaps that's why modern anxiety is more linked to philosophy than psychology. We've never had so many options, so many possibilities, so much control over our lives. But instead of feeling free, we feel suffocated, as if the immensity of the choices paralyzed us. What if this is the real root of your anguish? Throughout this video, we'll explore this idea in depth. We'll understand why freedom can be terrifying, why we run away from it, and how we can learn to use it to our advantage. If you've ever felt that something is out of place, that your life is a script you didn't write, this video could be just the thing you need to see your own existence through different eyes. The question now is, are you ready to face the truth? Because in the end, life begins when we stop running away and decide to be the authors of our own story. Ever since we were little, we've heard that freedom is something to be won. The dream of being able to choose your own path, decide your own destiny, make your own rules. But what if I told you that this idea is incomplete? That freedom is not just a gift, but a crushing weight? Jean-Paul Sartre said that we are condemned to be free. But what does it mean to be condemned to freedom? When we hear the word condemnation, we think of punishment, of something imposed against our will. And that's exactly the irony of freedom. We didn't ask for it, but we have no choice but to carry it. You can even try to ignore this, to live on autopilot, to follow what others say is right. But deep down, every choice is still yours. And that's why freedom comes with something disturbing. The anguish of knowing that there's no manual, no guaranteed path, and no one to blame if things go wrong. Imagine you're standing on top of a cliff. The wind is blowing hard. The horizon stretches out before you, and suddenly a frightening thought arises. What if I jumped? You don't want to jump, but just knowing that you could, that this choice exists, makes you dizzy. This is the abyss of freedom, an infinite space of possibilities that can either elevate you or destroy you. Most people prefer to believe that their lives follow a script, that the path is already mapped out by God, fate, or forces beyond their control. And in a way, this idea brings comfort, because if life already has a plan, you don't have to worry. Just follow the instructions and everything will be fine. But Sartre destroys this illusion. There is no pre-written destiny. There is no essence before existence. You are born, and then you have to decide who you will be. This means that every mistake, every detour, every regret is entirely your own. There is no higher entity to absolve you, no secret purpose waiting to be discovered. And that's what makes freedom so scary. Because when there are no more excuses, when there is no one left to carry the weight of your decisions, there is only you. Think of an actor on stage. He can play any role, assume any identity. But unlike the actor who follows a script written by someone else, you have to write your own text while you act. The problem is, what if you forget your lines? What if the audience judges you? What if, in the end, it's all a failure? This is the real anguish of freedom. You can choose any path, but there's no guarantee that it will be the right one. And that's exactly why so many people prefer to avoid this responsibility. Some cling to rigid dogmas, others follow what society dictates, and many simply choose not to choose, letting the current of life drag them where it will. But Sartre warns us, even when you decide not to choose, that is already a choice. Freedom gives us power, but it also throws us into the abyss of doubt. And that's why so few actually embrace their own freedom, because doing so means taking a constant risk. It means accepting that there is no firm ground beneath your feet, only a sea of possibilities. Now I ask you, do you have the courage to face up to this responsibility? Or are you still looking for someone to write your story for you? If freedom is such a burden, then why don't we just run away from it? Wake up, work, pay bills, sleep, and repeat it all over again the next day. Life goes by like this, and one day you realize that time has slipped away. Dreams were postponed. Opportunities went unnoticed. This happens because no one ever taught you how to see the game of life the right way. But there is another path. If you want to reach the next level, you need to access new knowledge. And that's exactly what you'll find in the White Rabbit Codes. This book will open your eyes to what is really happening. You'll understand why you keep getting stuck in the same cycles, learn how to escape autopilot, and start seeing the opportunities that were always there. And finally, you'll make decisions that truly lead to the life you've always wanted. If you feel ready for this change, the link is in the pinned comment. You'll be surprised at how simple it can be to increase your prosperity. Success is a decision. The choice is yours. If freedom is an unbearable burden, the most tempting solution is to pretend it doesn't exist. We make excuses, cling to labels, follow paths we haven't consciously chosen, just to avoid facing the most uncomfortable truth. We are responsible for what we become. Jean-Paul Sartre called this bad faith. But what exactly does it mean to live in bad faith? It's more than lying to others. It's lying to yourself. It's convincing yourself that you have no choices when, in fact, you do. It's acting as if your identity is fixed, as if you're just a role you play rather than someone capable of changing your own story. Imagine a waiter. He's polite, efficient, knows the menu by heart, smiles at the customers. But Sartre asks us to notice something subtle. He exaggerates this role. His gestures are almost mechanical. His posture excessively professional. He doesn't just work as a waiter, he is the waiter. But this identity is a prison in disguise. Because the moment he believes he is just that, he gives up his freedom. He chooses to forget that he could be anything else. And this trap doesn't just happen to waiters, it happens to all of us. How many times have you heard or said phrases like, "That's just the way I am," or "That's not for me," or "I can't change now"? These statements seem harmless, but they hide something deeper, the fear of freedom. If you accept that you can change, you need to take responsibility for doing so. If you recognize that you can act differently, you have to deal with the weight of choosing. And the truth is that it's easier to cling to a fixed identity than to admit that we are always under construction. Psychology calls this confirmation bias. When we believe something about ourselves, we look for evidence to support that belief and ignore any evidence to the contrary. If someone says, "I'm shy," they will probably avoid social interactions, reinforcing their own narrative. If they say, "I'm unlucky in love," they will unconsciously sabotage relationships to validate this identity. The question is, are you really like this, or have you just decided that you are? Nietzsche had a similar idea. For him, human beings should not limit themselves to being, but to becoming, to grow, to evolve, to break their own molds. But that takes courage, because when you define yourself rigidly, you protect yourself from uncertainty. If you believe that your life is already set, you don't have to deal with the anxiety of new possibilities. Now, think about it. How many times have you found yourself wishing you were something stable, a fixed role, an immutable identity, something that didn't require so many choices? Maybe you've never formulated it like that. But what about that feeling of wanting someone to tell you exactly what to do? Wanting things to simply make sense without having to think about them all the time? This is the root of running away from yourself. But here's the problem. Those who run away from themselves are always running, but they never get anywhere. When you avoid your own freedom, you end up falling into contradictions. You want to feel unique, but you follow what others do. You want to be free, but you don't want to decide. You want your life to have meaning, but you want it to be given to you by someone from outside. But the reality is brutal. Nobody can give you meaning. You have to build it yourself. And that's the big dilemma. It's more comfortable to hide behind a piece of paper than face the emptiness of freedom. But does this really save us from anguish? Or does it just trap us in a cycle of fear and self-deception? And most importantly, if you're not who you think you are, then who are you really? Have you ever felt completely free until you realized you were being watched? The feeling of doing something without worry until suddenly that nagging awareness arises. What are others thinking of me now? This is one of the strangest phenomena of human existence. Before we are seen, we feel that we are ourselves. But the moment the other person's gaze catches our eyes, something changes. It's as if we suddenly have to play a role, as if our identity had been ripped away from us and returned in a new form, edited, filtered, and judged. Jean-Paul Sartre calls this the gaze of the other. For him, our identity is not something we construct on our own. It is shaped by the judgment of others. You can consider yourself strong, intelligent, funny, but you'll only feel that you really are these things if others confirm it. And the problem is that this validation is never within our control. Think of a time when you were alone, completely relaxed. Now imagine that a camera was recording everything without you knowing. As soon as someone shows you the video, your perception changes. You start to see yourself from the outside as a stranger. You notice your posture, your voice, your gestures. What was spontaneous now looks like a performance. And that's when Sartre deals us an unexpected blow. We are never masters of our own image. When we're alone, we feel we have control over who we are. But as soon as someone looks at us, we become an object for that gaze. And even worse, we never know exactly how we are being seen. Psychologist Charles Cooley called this the mirror self. We are not only what we believe ourselves to be, but what we believe others think we are. Have you ever noticed that you act differently depending on who you're around? The way you talk to your friends is not the same way you talk to your parents. And if you're in front of a stranger, your attitude may change completely. You're not pretending. You're just trying to control the version of yourself that will be perceived. But is that freedom? If we are constantly adjusting our identity to fit the eyes of others, then who are we when no one is looking? And here's the worst part, that gaze doesn't have to be real to imprison us. The possibility of being judged is enough to change our behavior. Michel Foucault explored this concept in the Panopticon, a prison model where the guards could watch the prisoners at any time, but the prisoners never knew when they were being watched. The result? They began to watch themselves. They didn't need chains. The fear of judgment was enough to keep them obedient. Now look around you. We live in an invisible panopticon. Our social networks are shop windows, where we carefully choose what to show. Our behavior is shaped by how many likes, comments, and approvals we receive. And, like the prisoners in the panopticon, we don't even need the real presence of others. The mere idea of being judged already conditions us. But what if, for a moment, you could turn off this surveillance? If you could exist without thinking about how you're being perceived? Do you really know who you are? Or do you just know who you've learned to appear to be? And most importantly, if you had the chance to free yourself from this invisible cage, would you have the courage to do so? The other day I was asked the question, who are you? The answer seems simple. You can say your name, your profession, your tastes, your memories. But what if I told you that none of this defines who you really are? We live believing that there is a true self, a unique essence that makes us who we are. But Sartre destroys this idea. We are not born with a fixed purpose. We don't have an immutable identity. We invent ourselves at every moment. But accepting this is uncomfortable, because if there is no fixed self, then what prevents us from changing radically at any moment? If everything we believe about ourselves can be deconstructed, what's left? Nietzsche said, "Become who you are." But that doesn't mean finding a secret, hidden identity within yourself. On the contrary, it means actively creating yourself every day, without the illusion that there is a ready-made destiny waiting to be discovered. But we resist this idea, because it's more comfortable to believe that we are one way and that's it. That we have a fixed personality, immutable traits, tastes that will never change. Because if we accept that we can be anything, we'll have to take responsibility for deciding who to be. And that's where self-deception comes in. Psychology shows that we have a deep need for internal coherence. We want to believe that we are stable, predictable, that our choices make sense within an ongoing narrative, and that's why we create stories about ourselves. I'm like this because I've always been like this. But is this true? Or just a way of avoiding the anguish of being free? Imagine someone who says, "I'm shy, I always have been." But is this shyness an essential part of who they are? Or did they behave shyly at some point in their life, receive this label from others, and unconsciously reinforce it? How many parts of your identity were actually chosen by you, and how many were inherited without question? Buddhism has an interesting concept, anatman, or the denial of a fixed self. The idea that our identity is fluid, always changing. If we look closely, we're not the same people we were 5 years ago. So why do we insist on believing that we are? Perhaps because it's terrifying to admit that there is no true self, only a self in constant construction. But if that's true, then every decision we make matters a lot more than we'd like to admit. Because if there is no fixed self, we are only what we choose to be at every moment. And that means that every choice changes us, for better or for worse. But what if we make mistakes? What if we make bad choices? The freedom to be whoever we want comes with a price, the risk of mistakes, regrets, and failure. And that's exactly why many people prefer to cling to false certainties rather than accept that they could fall at any moment. But running away from a mistake can be the biggest mistake of all. Imagine an artist standing in front of a blank canvas. He holds the brush, ready to make the first stroke, but he hesitates. What if he makes a mistake? What if he ruins everything? Better to wait a little longer. Better to plan better. Better to make sure everything is perfect before you start. Days go by, then months. He continues in front of the canvas, but he never paints anything. The freedom to create something beautiful also carries the risk of failing miserably. And faced with this risk, many choose the worst mistake of all, not to act. The truth is that we don't fear freedom itself. We fear the weight of the consequences. Each choice means giving up all the others. Each path taken is a whole universe of discarded possibilities. What if we're making an irreversible mistake? Psychology calls this the paradox of choice. The more options we have, the harder it is to decide. Studies show that when faced with too many possibilities, people often avoid choosing altogether, for fear of making the wrong choice. And this fear is not just a matter of logic. It's ingrained in our instincts. Since primitive times, making a mistake could mean death. A wrong path in the forest, a wrong decision when hunting. Any mistake could be fatal. Our minds have been programmed to avoid risks, even if today the consequences of a mistake are much lower. But there's a problem with that. If there's no way to avoid making a mistake, the only way to really fail is to never try. Nietzsche talked about this with the concept of the eternal return. Imagine that you were condemned to live this same life, exactly as it is, over and over again, forever. Every choice, every hesitation, every regret repeated endlessly. Could you bear that fate? Or worse still, if your life ended today, would you regret the choices you never made? Harvard Business School did a study on regrets at the end of life, and what people regretted most were not the mistakes they made, but the chances they didn't take, the words not said, the experiences not lived, the risks that could have led to something incredible, but were never taken. Because there's something worse than making a mistake. Looking back and realizing that you never really dared to live. And perhaps that's the biggest mistake of all, thinking that life will give us enough time to hesitate. But what if that time runs out before you know it? Is this content making you reflect and sparking new ways of thinking? If so, click the super thanks button just below the video. It's a way to say thank you and help me bring more content like this to those who need to reflect on life. There comes a time when planning is no use. Thinking, reflecting, analyzing every possibility. All this may prepare you, but it will never be enough. Because at some point, the next step doesn't depend on any more calculations. It just depends on you throwing yourself into it. But human beings resist this. We want guarantees. We want certainties. We want a roadmap that tells us exactly what to do. And the scariest truth of existence is that there is no such script. As children, we believe that adults know what they're doing. That there is a secret plan for life. A set of rules that, if we follow correctly, will lead us to a happy ending. But then we grow up and realize that no one has all the answers. That most people only pretend to be sure while improvising along the way. And if that's the case, what are we left with? Sartre said that existence precedes essence. This means that there is no purpose waiting for us. We are not born with a defined destiny. It's up to us to build meaning into our own lives. This can seem liberating, but it's also terrifying because it means that no one will come and save you. No external force will make the difficult decisions for you. And if you fail, there will be no universal system to absolve you. But there's another side to this. If there's no manual, there are no limits either. Life doesn't follow a straight line. All the time, there are invisible forks, hidden opportunities, unexpected paths. But only those who take risks can see them. Think about the most important moments in your life. Have you ever known with absolute certainty that you were making the right decision? Or was it a leap into the unknown? A gamble with no guarantees? The world belongs to those who dare. Human history wasn't written by those who waited for certainties. It was written by those who created their own paths. And yes, that means you can make mistakes. But so what? Mistakes are not the end. Error is the price of freedom. Perhaps what scares us most is not the uncertainty, but the fact that we are entirely responsible for what we become. And perhaps that's why emptiness accompanies us. That inner silence, that uncomfortable feeling that arises in moments of pause, when there are no distractions, when no one is around. Have you ever felt that? Like there's something missing? Something you can't name? All our lives we try to fill this void. With work, with relationships, with distractions. We try to create a fixed meaning, something that defines us forever, because the idea of being an unfinished draft terrifies us. We want definitive answers. We want a fixed me to cling to. But Sartre reminded us of something essential. There is no essence before existence. What if this emptiness isn't a mistake? What if it's exactly the space we need to reinvent ourselves? Perhaps the anguish we feel when we look at our own freedom is not a punishment, but a call. A reminder that, as long as we are alive, there will always be something to build on. There will always be room to change, to make mistakes, to redo. Nietzsche said that in order to be reborn as something new, you first have to die. Not physically, but symbolically. To leave behind who we were in order to create who we can be. Because the greatest illusion we've been taught is that one day we'll be complete. That one day all our doubts will disappear. That one day we'll have all the answers. But the truth is that we never will. And if we do, it will be because we've stopped living. After all, if you've found all the answers, you've stopped asking questions. And perhaps that's the ultimate question. Are you ready to die to your old self and finally be born as who you were meant to be? Because in the end, the only thing scarier than taking the... If you've made it this far, you've already taken a step beyond most people. You're subscribed to the channel, you watch the videos, you reflect on every idea. Now the question is, how far do you want to take this? If you want to take the next step and truly apply this knowledge to your life, the White Rabbit Codes is ready for you. The link is in the pinned comment. Remember, success is a decision. The choice is yours. Count on me and follow the White Rabbit.